Okay, so for this first section, we're going to talk about zero and negative exponents. As a review, we talked about what a power is. A power is made up of a base and an exponent. So the base is obviously that big number there, and the exponent is written in that upper right-hand corner. So as we move on through this section, we talk about exponential rules. Be aware that the bases are going to have to be the same. It doesn't apply for this section, but when we talk about the base, we're talking about that main number. Okay, so the first section we're going to talk about is pretty straightforward. The first part, I'm not going to spend too much time on, but it's something to remember, is that anytime a number is raised to the 0 power, your answer is always 1. All right, so don't get confused. It's not 0. Anything to the 0 power is always 1, so it doesn't matter what it is. So if you look at these examples, -4 to the 0 power, 1. 5 to the 0 power, 1. Right? This grouped whatever it would be to the 0 power, 1. So 2 to the 0 power, that's going to equal 1. 1/3 to the 0 power, 1. This whole mess raised to the 0 power, 1. All right, so that section, whenever you see something to the 0 power, it will be just 1. All right? Now, for the negative exponent portion, what we're going to practice is writing exponents with only using positive exponents. What you notice here is anything to the negative exponent, we can make that a positive by basically moving it to the opposite side of the fraction. So a to the negative n is the same as moving that to the bottom and making a positive n. It won't change the base, just the exponent to a positive and a negative. All right, so and it says for every non-zero number a, so meaning it's not 0, you can do that. To change the exponent to either a positive or negative number, move the power to the opposite side of the fraction and change the value of the exponent sign. And if you don't see an exponent, think of it having an exponent of 1. So 2 is 2 to the first power. X is x to the first power. And that's going to come in handy when we are talking about simplifying exponents. All right, so if I look at rewriting expressions using only positive exponents, we are going to either move a portion of it to the bottom or top of a fraction, or we are going to just leave it. So if we look at this, 5 to the -2, that moves to the bottom, and 1 would go on top because we think of this as over 1. And then 5 squared is 25. Over here we have 1 over t to the -2. That goes up, becomes a positive. So, and then the 1 would be on the bottom, so it's just t squared. Here again, if you see just a number without an exponent, think of it as a 1. So when you look at this problem, we have 2 to the first power. That stays on the top. This x to the -2 goes to the bottom, becomes a positive 2. This y to the -7 goes to the bottom, becomes a positive 7. Over here, x to the -4 goes to the bottom, and z to the 0 power is just 1, so that kind of just goes away. We don't need to worry about that, and that would be x to the 4th power. All right, so this next page, we are going to practice some of these problems. And again, think of, I like to, when I set these up, sometimes I just like to draw a fraction bar right away. So then I can say, okay, this is either going to stay on the top or it's going to move to the bottom. In this case, x to the -1 will go to the bottom and become x to the first power. If there's nothing left over on the top, we're just going to put a 1 there. So y to the -2, it's going to move to the bottom and become a positive 2. We'll put the 1 on the top. Over here, x to the -4 will go to the bottom, become a 4. Y to the -3 goes to the bottom and becomes positive, and we put a 1 on the top. All right, so now here's a few examples of where it's on the bottom and it's negative already, and we're just going to move it to the top. So if I draw my exponent, this x goes up to the top, or draw my fraction bar, I should say, becomes a positive 1, and we can think of it over 1, which would just be x, or x to the first power if we leave it like that. Y to the -4 again moves to the top and becomes a positive, and over 1, so that would just be y to the 4th power. Here, both of these would move to the top, and we would get x to the 4th, y to the 3rd, and we can put it over 1, but we can really just write the x to the fourth, y to the third. Okay, so now sometimes you're going to have ones that are positive and negative, and that's where it kind of gets a little interesting. It's kind of fun, but we're just moving things to the top and the bottom. So if I look at this, I'm going to draw my fraction bar again. I have an x to the positive 2, so that's going to stay what I like to call on the top of the fraction because we're not changing it. If I moved it to the bottom, it would become a negative. And this y to the negative third is going to go to the bottom and become a positive 3. And now we are dealing with both positive exponents. All right, in this example, we have 4 times y times x to the negative fourth. If you don't see an exponent with the numbers, think of it as a positive 1. All right, so my 4 stays on the top, my y stays on the top, and my x to the negative 4 goes to the bottom and just becomes a positive 4. So really all we're doing is just moving things to the top or the bottom, and then if we move them, we change the sign. If we don't move them, we keep them the same. So over here, we have x to the negative 2, that's going to go on the bottom, and become x squared, and y to the negative 6 will go to the top, and we make that a positive. So again, once you get the hang of it, it's just moving things to one side or the other. These last two examples, again, we have a couple more numbers. I'm going to put a little 1 here for that 7, because that 7 is a 1. So let's start on the top. We have 7 to the first power, that's going to stay. X to the 0 power just becomes a 1, so let's just ignore that. Y to the negative 5, that's going to go to the bottom and become y to the 5th. Now let's look at the bottom. I have a 7 to the negative 1, that's going to move to the top, become 7 to the first power, 2 to the first power, or just 2. And then z squared is already positive, so that's going to stay on the bottom. Now you could simplify this a little bit further and do 7 times 2 is 14 over y to the 5th z squared. All right, over here again you're doing each power. So we have a base and the exponent, base, exponent, base, exponent. So let's go ahead and do this. So 3, and I like to start with just the top, and then I go to the bottom, and you just work your way through the problem. So 3 to the negative 3 will go to the bottom and become 3 to the third. X to the 10 stays on the top because it's already positive, so it stays on that side. Y to negative 3 will go to the bottom and become y to the third. All right, so now I'm going to go to the bottom numbers. 2 to the negative 1, it's negative, so I'm going to move it up to the top. So I have 2 to the first power. Z to the positive 2, it's already positive, so leave it where it is. And W to the negative 11, that's going to go to the top and become a positive 11. When we rewrite these, what you'll notice is they'll put the whole numbers out front, and sometimes if it's a small enough exponent, they will actually change that to a number. So the top I would rewrite as 2, x to the 10th, w to the 11th, and on the bottom I would do 3 to the third. So if I look at this, we just have these squared, but this basic calculator doesn't have the exponent, so I'm going to bring up the decimals calculator. So I'll go ahead and do that. And if you look at, as this is loading, this button is going to square it. This button will let you put whatever you want in there. So if I do 3 and then hit that button to the third power, that's going to give me 27. All right, so I can actually go back here and call 3 to the third power 27. And then y to the third z squared. All right, so for this section, it's just basically 1. If you know that it's raised to the 0 power, it equals 1. And if it's negative, you're just moving it to the opposite side of the fraction and changing it to a positive. So if it's a negative on the bottom, move it to the top and make it positive. And if it's a negative on the top, move it to the bottom and make it positive.